All right, so welcome to another deep dive. And today, wow, this is going to be interesting. We're taking a look at a question that you sent in.
Okay.
It has to do with how some of the biggest economies out there,
Yeah.
how their constitutions, how those documents
Hmm.
grapple with this whole new world of cryptocurrency.
Right.
And what's really cool is, to really get to the bottom of this,
Yeah.
you actually sent us excerpts from, like, the Canadian Constitution.
Wow.
The German Constitution. We've even got the U.S. and the U.K.'s kind of documents in here. I mean, talk about hitting the legal books, right?
Yeah, it is a really timely question, though, because essentially what we're looking at are, the rule books,
Yeah.
like you said, for how these countries manage their economies.
Yeah.
And they were written long before digital currencies were even, a thought.
Exactly. It's like we're trying to, I don't know, use like a 19th century map to navigate a futuristic city. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where do we even begin with this?
Well, I think a logical starting point would be to examine how these constitutions address the concept of money and who has the power to control it.
Okay, so let's look at that, because right here in the Canadian Constitution, Section 91, it specifically says the federal government has authority over currency and coinage.
Uh-huh.
It seems pretty clear-cut, like they're in charge of the money.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's very common, actually, globally, this idea of centralized control over currency. And, think of it like this. Governments, they need tools
Right.
to manage their economies. And so things like, controlling inflation, setting interest rates, implementing, fiscal policies.
Yeah.
Traditionally, that power over, quote unquote, the official money, that's a key lever in that process.
Okay, that makes total sense. And looking at the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, it says Congress has the power to coin money, regulate the value of it, and also foreign coin. So same idea here. The government calls the shots on what's legal tender.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is that even in the early days of the United States, this very power, it was a source of huge debate.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Remember all those controversies? Like around establishing a central bank?
Right.
There was, and still is, a lot of back and forth about how much control a single institution should have over a nation's money supply.
Oh, wow. So now fast forward to today, to the age of cryptocurrency.
Right.
We've got this decentralized system where, in theory, no single entity is like holding all the cards.
Right.
So how do you even start to figure that out?
Right.
Within these constitutional frameworks that were obviously designed for a totally different time?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right.
That is exactly why the legal and economic landscapes are in such a state of flux right now. Because does existing authority over traditional currency automatically just extend to crypto? Or is this something so fundamentally different that it requires a whole new set of rules?
Right.
And
then you add on top of that, we've got the UK. They have their unwritten constitution.
Right.
It's like steeped in tradition, legal precedents.
Yeah.
How do they approach something like this? Like something as radical as crypto?
It's fascinating. The UK situation really is a fascinating case study because there is not a single codified document, like a written constitution.
Right.
So their approach is inherently more flexible, but it's also a lot less predictable.
Right.
Courts and parliament are going to have a really crucial role in interpreting how existing legal principles apply to this new technology. So we might see a situation where rulings on specific cases set the tone for how crypto is regulated, rather than some, sweeping top-down approach.
So what I'm hearing is we have these foundational documents that basically lay out the rules of the game for economic power. But then crypto comes along and just throws a wrench in the whole system.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, and that tension is at the heart of the regulatory debate that's happening all over the world right now. On the one hand, you've got governments. They're trying to figure out how to maintain stability, how to prevent misuse. But then on the other hand, you have this incredible potential for innovation, for disruption.
Yeah.
And many people would say that that shouldn't be stifled.
It seems like finding that balance, that sweet spot between, control and innovation.
Yeah.
That's going to be a huge challenge for governments moving forward.
Absolutely. It's a tightrope walk. And the stakes are really, really high. We're talking about the future of finance,
Mm-hmm.
the role of government in a digital age, and ultimately individual economic freedom in a world that's changing really, really rapidly.
Well, this deep dive is already proving to be pretty thought-provoking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we started by just looking at how these constitutions, how they approach, this idea of traditional currency. But I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Next, I think we need to delve deeper into how these constitutional principles are actually being tested and reinterpreted
Okay.
in the face of this, crypto revolution. And that's where things get really, really interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. What's fascinating to me is like this whole rise of cryptocurrency, it's not just, like a technological disruption.
Right.
It's really like a fundamental challenge to some of those core ideas about like economic power
Yeah.
that are built into these constitutions.
Okay, help me understand that connection. Like, how does crypto shake things up at that deeper level?
So for centuries, right,
Yeah.
governments, they've been like the primary custodians of economic power.
Hmm.
They're the ones that issue currency. They set the rules.
Right.
And ultimately, they have a huge influence on how money flows within their borders.
Right. And we just saw, like, how those powers are literally spelled out in their constitution.
Exactly. But crypto, like by its very nature, it wants to decentralize that power.
Oh.
It brings in this idea of like a financial system that can operate outside the control of any single government or institution.
So it's like a tug of war then,
Yeah.
over who gets to call the shots.
That is a great analogy.
Right.
And that tension, that's what plays out in how governments approach crypto regulation.
Okay.
So on one end of the spectrum, you have countries that are very, very cautious, even restrictive,
Mm-hmm.
They see crypto as a potential threat to their financial stability, and they're quick to like impose rules to try to mitigate those risks.
Well, that makes sense. I mean,
Yep.
governments, they are responsible, right, for protecting their citizens
Yeah,
and making sure that the economy runs smoothly.
absolutely. But it's also important to remember that, too much regulation can actually stifle innovation.
Right.
If the rules are too burdensome, it can discourage businesses and individuals from adopting it,
Yeah.
and ultimately that could hinder its potential benefits.
So that's finding that balance.
Yeah.
Like finding that sweet spot where you're mitigating the risks,
Yeah.
but you're not, like, stopping progress.
Exactly. And that's what makes things so interesting, because there's no one-size-fits-all solution here.
Right.
Each country's approach to crypto regulation is going to be shaped by its own like unique economic and political context.
Okay, so let's look at some examples. You mentioned the UK earlier.
Uh-huh.
With their system, which relies so much on precedent,
Right.
how have they responded to this whole crypto thing?
So in the UK, we've seen like a cautious but generally like pragmatic approach, I would say.
Yep.
There's an understanding that blockchain technology,
Mhm.
this has the potential to completely revolutionize many sectors,
Yeah.
not just finance. So they're trying to find ways to foster that innovation while also putting some safeguards in place,
Can you give me a concrete example of what that looks like?
Sure. So the UK has the Financial Conduct Authority. That's their regulatory body.
Good.
They've been relatively proactive in setting guidelines for crypto businesses. They've created this thing called a regulatory sandbox,
Okay.
which basically allows companies to test out new products and services in like a controlled environment
Right.
before they release them to the wider market. It's a way to kind of like encourage experimentation without exposing consumers to too much risk.
That sounds smart.
Yeah.
What about a country like Germany? We saw in their constitution,
Yep.
they place a lot of emphasis on individual freedoms.
Yeah.
How do those values factor into how they're approaching crypto regulations?
Germany's interesting
Hmm.
because they have traditionally had a very, very strong culture of privacy and financial autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been some pushback, against the idea of like heavy-handed government intervention in this space.
So are they taking like a more hands-off approach then?
I wouldn't say hands-off. They've implemented regulations, but they're trying to find that balance, right, between protecting consumers and allowing for innovation. For example, they've been at the forefront of developing regulations for what are called security token offerings, or STOs,
Okay.
which are basically a way for companies to raise capital using blockchain technology.
Okay.
Their approach has been to ensure transparency,
Right.
ensure investor protection, while still allowing this new fundraising mechanism to flourish.
It sounds like each country is kind of finding its own way then
Yeah.
to navigate this whole new landscape. But isn't there a risk of like fragmentation then.
Yeah.
What happens if we end up with like this patchwork of different rules and regulations all over the world?
That's a valid concern.
Right.
Because if every country just does its own thing, it could create barriers to entry for businesses that are operating in the crypto space, and it could make it hard for individuals to use crypto across borders.
So is there a solution? Like, how do we ensure some level of global coordination? We're talking about a technology that's like inherently borderless.
That is a question that like policymakers and regulators, they are really grappling with right now. Some are calling for international standards, frameworks to ensure a more level playing field. Others are saying, like, it's too early to impose, strict rules on something that's changing so rapidly.
It doesn't sound like there's an easy answer.
Not really.
But it seems pretty clear that this conversation about crypto regulation, it's only going to become more complex and more important as the technology continues to develop and spread.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important for everyone, not just governments and businesses, but individuals too, to stay informed and, engage in these discussions. Because the choices we make today about how to regulate this technology, they are going to have huge implications for our economies and our societies for years to come.
This deep dive, I have to say, is really opening my eyes to, like, the interconnectedness of it all. I mean, we started by looking at documents that are hundreds of years old. But those constitutional principles, they are still shaping how we respond to these, like, cutting-edge innovations.
Exactly. And it just goes to show you that the future of finance, it's not just being written by, coders and tech entrepreneurs. It's being shaped by legal scholars, policymakers, everyday citizens, everyone who is grappling with these fundamental questions about power, about control, and the role of technology in our lives.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful so far. We've explored those constitutional underpinnings of economic power. We've examined how those principles are being challenged by crypto. We've even looked at how different countries are trying to navigate this new landscape. But before we wrap up, I am curious what you think all this means for individuals. Like, we talked about governments, we talked about businesses, but what about the average person who's just trying to, like, wrap their head around this whole crypto thing?
That's a great question. And that's one we'll explore in our final segment, because while the regulatory landscape is still taking shape, there are definitely things individuals can do right now to protect themselves, to make informed decisions, and maybe even seize some of the opportunities that this new technology presents.
All right, so we've really gone deep on this whole thing, constitutions to crypto regulation. But let's bring it back down to earth. What does it mean for, like, the average person, the person who hears Bitcoin, Ethereum, all these terms, they're like, should I even care about this?
It's a great question, and I think the answer is probably yes, at least a little bit, right? Even if you aren't, going to become a crypto trader or put all your money into Bitcoin or whatever, this technology is having a big impact, and it's probably going to impact you in some way.
Okay, so, like, convince me. Why should the average person be paying attention to this?
Well, for one thing, think about your finances, right? We talked about how crypto is, like, challenging those traditional financial systems. This could lead to more competition, more innovation in the financial services industry, which could benefit you as a consumer. Lower fees, faster transactions, maybe even new types of financial products that, work better for you.
That's interesting, but I also hear, like, a lot about scams.
A
lot about risks.
For sure.
And it feels kind of Wild Westy.
You're absolutely right. There are definitely risks involved. And that's why it's so important to educate yourself. Before you even think about investing in crypto, take some time to, like, learn the basics, understand how it works, the different types of cryptocurrencies that are out there, and really understand the risks involved.
So where's a good place to even start with that?
Well,
Because there's so much information out there. It can feel overwhelming.
Absolutely, but there are a lot of great resources online. Reputable websites like CoinDesk, Cointelegraph. They offer articles, guides, even courses for beginners. And don't forget your local library. They often have books, resources on personal finance investing that can help you understand this whole thing.
That's a good point. It's always good to, like, check multiple sources. And not just like rely on what you see on social media.
For sure, and be wary of anyone who's promising like guaranteed returns or get-rich-quick schemes.
Right.
Remember, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Okay, so let's say I've done my research.
Yeah.
I understand the risks.
Okay.
And I'm kind of interested in like dipping my toe in. Right?
Yeah.
What are the practical steps? Like, what do I actually need to do?
Well, the first thing you need is a cryptocurrency exchange account. This is basically a platform where you can buy, sell, trade cryptocurrencies, kind of like a stock brokerage account.
Okay, any tips on choosing a reputable exchange?
Uh,
Because,
yeah, there are a lot out there.
Yeah.
Look for ones that are well established, have a good track record, are regulated in your jurisdiction, do your research,
Okay.
read reviews,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure you understand their fee structure and their security measures.
Makes sense. And you mentioned crypto wallets earlier.
Yeah.
I'm still a little fuzzy on what those are.
Right.
Why do I need one?
So think of a crypto wallet like your own like personal digital vault
Okay.
where you actually store your cryptocurrency.
Okay.
When you buy crypto on an exchange, you can usually keep it in their custodial wallet, but it's generally better to transfer it to your own non-custodial wallet.
Okay, so why is that important?
Well, because with a non-custodial wallet, you control those private keys,
Mm-hmm.
which are like the passwords to your crypto. So this gives you more control, more security over your assets.
Right.
You know, if the exchange gets hacked or goes bankrupt or something, your crypto in a non-custodial wallet should be safe.
Okay, that makes sense, but it also sounds like a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
What if I lose those private keys?
That is the catch, right?
Yeah.
If you lose your private keys, you lose access to your crypto.
Oh, wow.
And there's no way to get it back.
Right.
So it's super important to store your keys securely. Maybe even consider a hardware wallet that's like a physical device that stores your keys offline.
Wow. This is a lot to take in.
Yeah.
But it's also pretty amazing to think that individuals now have more control over their own money because of this technology.
Exactly. That's the whole point. Crypto is making us rethink our relationship with money.
Yeah.
Explore new possibilities. Whether you decide to invest or not, it's definitely a fascinating thing to keep an eye on.
It really is. Well, I got to say, this whole deep dive has been really eye-opening.
Yeah, it has.
I mean, we started looking at how constitutions define power. We explored the challenges with crypto. We even got into like the nuts and bolts of like buying, storing, managing it.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It has been quite a journey, and I think the takeaway here is this is really just the beginning. This whole crypto space is constantly evolving, so stay curious, keep learning, and who knows, the future's wide open.
It is. That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring.